So I just wanted to welcome everybody. This is a first for us. It's a first for me anyway to do this. And I just want to let you know that you can text a message, text a question to Murph if you want, or raise your hand and we can put you on audio at the end and you can ask a question. And otherwise, we're going to keep everybody muted while Murph does his talk for us. And so with that, I want to make an introduction to Murph. So I've always had a great admiration for yacht designers myself. I saw a movie back in 1980 about a guy named Phil Weld who had done the O-Star on a boat called Moxie. And so I looked up the boat and everything, and Dick Newick was the designer, so I started looking at all his designs. I went from Dick Newick to Walter Green, then I went from Walter Green to L. Francis Hershoff, and then I went to Dave Pedrick, and then in 2000 I was watching this woman cross the ocean single-handed in a boat called Kingfisher, and of course that's open 60. So then I wanted to know all about open 60s, and turns out they're designed by a company called Owen Clarke, and it's Merfyn Owen. And so when he became a member of this club, I almost fell off my chair. He was like a rock star to me, and I was just like overwhelmed. And Murph, I get like tongue tied around you because it's like I'm talking to Paul McCartney of boat designs. So anyway, I'm just a big fan, and we are so lucky he's a member of our club. Well done, Ashley. And so with that, I'd like to turn it over to Murph and to our speaker series, our first one on Zoom.
Here we go. Well, thank you very much for the invitation to speak to all the members. It's really a great opportunity, I think, during the breakdown to break the routine and during the lockdown to break the routine. And it's been wonderful dragging up some old memories as I rummage through my photo archive. I was told I had to come up with a talk that was entertaining and had great images, and I'm not generally used to that because normally I do technical talks. So I had to ditch all my graphs and my notes on fluid dynamics and lift and drag and come up with something which hopefully I think you'll enjoy. If anyone has any questions about fluid and drag and all that kind of thing at the end, I'm happy to answer them. Anyway, what I decided to do was to tell some stories in a roughly chronological order, starting with how someone with my unlikely background would become a yacht designer. I soon realized that what I would actually be doing is telling the story of how I was helped along the way by so many great people, many who are now my closest friends. Mike Pegg, who was my personal coach and mentor at one point, would have called these people strokers. Some of my friends, like Che Blythe, would be appalled to be called a stroker. But that's what they are. They're people who help you along. And the result of that is that you feel the need to do the same thing, and that's how life moves. So this bunch of stories, they're as much theirs as mine, and without them, my life would have been very, very different. And so I've got so many stories and so many friends, I can't include them all or do any of them real justice in the time I have. So if I've left anything out, then I'm sorry about that. Anyway, my story begins with my mother and my father in North Wales and north of England, two ordinary working class people. My dad was a locomotive driver. You'd call him, in the States, you'd call him a steam engine engineer, I guess. He drove steam engines, that's what he did. Eventually, he opened up a pub with my mum, and then they opened up a hotel, and supposedly they became publicans and hoteliers. They instilled me with a work ethic, which, for better or for worse, is what I have. I'm a bloody hard worker. But the great thing that they did was they never held me back. Anything that I did, that I got supported through my life, and that goes on even to this day. It wasn't until after I designed Kingfisher that my mother said, I think I was at the age of 30, whatever it was, my mum said, "Oh, so you actually do have a real job." Anyway, the closest that my family had to the origins to the sea was my grandfather, who was at the Battle of Jutland on a destroyer called the Sparrowhawk, which was sunk. I had two uncles in the Royal Navy during the Second World War, but the closest I got to the sea was going to Cornwall on holiday. There's a picture of me as a young guy, but I really wasn't into the sea. But what I wanted to be was this man, Merfyn Davies. From the time when I was at grammar school and until university, all I wanted to do was to play Wales. Play for Wales, put on the red jersey and play for Wales. That's what I wanted to do. But
Murph, sorry, Murph, I'm just going to interrupt you real quickly. Don't forget to share your screen with us. We can't see your slideshow just yet.
Oh no, you're kidding.
Nope.
Oh. Let's try again then. I'll whip through those slides quickly and I'll get to Merfyn Davies.
Excellent. Now we can see it.
Okay. My mum and dad, the Sparrowhawk, me, and Merfyn Davies, Welsh captain, British Lions. That's all I wanted to be. But I kind of realised that I wasn't going to make the Welsh jersey. I played for North of England, Colts under 19, but that really wasn't enough. And if I wasn't going to make the Welsh jersey, then I needed to do something different. I needed to put all the passion and energy that I put into rugby and find something else that I was half decent at. Anyway, I was lucky at the age of 16 at school. I was doing a thing called Project Trident, which was work experience and helping the community and outdoor pursuits. And I got the offer to go sailing. Now, I'd already done canoeing and climbing and all that side of things. So sailing seemed to be an appropriate thing to do because I was going to join the Merchant Navy. So at the age of 16, I went down to Hamble in the UK, and I went sailing on a sail training boat from the Ocean Youth Club, a sister ship of this boat, the Samuel Whitbread. And I caught the bug. I first went sailing in August 1979 during the week of the Fastnet storm. I didn't have any of the right gear. I was wearing jeans and pullover, mightily scared, mightily cold, mightily wet, but it just grabbed me. And I kind of knew then, that very week, I knew this is what I wanted to do. And from that moment on, I put all my energy and time into sailing. At the age of 16, I left school, not because I didn't like school. I enjoyed school. I got on with people. But I really wanted to get out there. I felt that I'd outgrown school, so I joined the Merchant Navy. And I went on a Merchant Navy Engineers Cadet Officer course. I spent 2 years in Plymouth, and then a year and a half at sea, and then a year in Liverpool. And during all this time, during all my leave, I would take time off to go sailing. I basically wouldn't go home. I'd be sailing, and in all the leave that I could get, and the leave when I wasn't on ship. This was the most famous of the ships I was on. This is the QE2. This was my third ship. My very first steamship. The ships I've been on before were motorboats, but this was a steamship. And there she is sailing away, and there's people waving Union Jacks. That wasn't the normal send-off that we used to get when we went off with passengers, but this time, this was the 12th of May, 1982, and our passengers were rather special. They were members of the 5th Infantry Brigade, Scots Guards, Welsh Guards, the Gurkhas, and the Royal Artillery. And we were on our way down to South Atlantic to the Falkland Islands and South Georgia, a place that will crop up in my talk a little bit later as well. And down there on the left at the bottom of Chile and Argentina, you can see there's an arrow pointing towards the Falkland Islands. That's where they are. And at the very bottom of Chile and Argentina, of course, there is Cape Horn, which will also feature for some reason in the talk in a little moment. So off we went, and 6 weeks campaigning, steaming down south, radars off. Once that bulkhead's closed up, I was damage control officer as well as running the boiler room. During my watch, I was in charge of the boiler room. We'd run with radars off at night, or day and night. We had submarines looking for us, aircraft looking for us. Helicopters would fly off our aft deck at night and circle the boat and look for chinks of lights in the hundreds and hundreds of portholes we had. It was really a very exciting time. But at the end of it, the Merchant Navy wasn't really the same Navy that after 4.5 years as when I joined, and it was clearly going downhill. I was working for Q at the time, but boats were being flagged. Things were not going to be the same. So I decided I'd go to university. And for a degree, I thought, well, why don't I try naval architecture? So I had a choice of colleges to go to. And I chose UCL at London because it was the home of the Royal Naval Engineering degree course. They closed the Royal Navy College at Greenwich, and the degree course for the Royal Corps of Naval Constructors, whose job is to design submarines for the Royal Navy, was at UCL. So I felt, well, their engineering side of things is going to be very current. They're going to be up with the latest developments in hydrodynamics, software, computers, and all that side of things, and they'll be very well funded. And I was right. My professor was former head of submarine design at Bristol for the Royal Navy. They also happened to have a Nicholson 32 as a boat, which was also interesting too. But the main reason was because they were up to date, and it was a fascinating place to work and live. And the people that I met there formed a lot of my ideas early on in my yacht design career, and it was a wonderful 3 years. Made partly wonderful because I sailed on this little chap. It's his Applejack, owned by a fellow called Rupert Kidd, who was an oil engineer in the city of London. This was a very, very wet boat. My very first racing boat I ever raced on. I spent a couple of years racing her. She was famous because Mark Gatehouse of Brooks and Gatehouse, the instrument guys, he did a double-handed transatlantic race from Plymouth to Newport, Rhode Island. And on arrival, his crew was hospitalized because he was hypothermic and so wet, they had to put him into hospital. And this was the boat I raced for a couple of years while at university. And in '85, I was fortunate enough, for whatever reason, I'd spent a lot of time sailing, been on lots of different boats, and I was voted UK, the Royal Yachting Association's Young Yachts Person of the Year. And my reward for this was to go sailing with this fella, Peter Phillips, ex-British policeman, and he built a boat called Novanet, which was an 85-foot cat, massive boat in its day. And I was lucky to get an invitation to sail on the delivery up to Kiel for the Round Europe race that year, Kiel in Germany. The race would start in Kiel and stop at a number of different ports around Europe, and finish off in Toulon and then sail down to Sardinia, Puerto Chiavo. Anyway, I did the delivery, and I was quite a techie guy at the time, relatively. I'd written computer software. I thought myself as a bit of a navigator. The Ocean Youth Club had taught me really an awful lot about seamanship and navigation and weather. And Peter didn't get on that well with the navigator on the boat at the time. And when I arrived in Kiel, I was asked to stay on, and I was given the job as navigator. So at the tender age of 22, I was navigating an 85-foot cat down the coast of Portugal. This is the days before SATCOM or GPS. We had a bit of Decca, a bit of Loran, an occasional satellite fix, but I remember charging down the coast of Portugal doing horizontal sextant sights and to get our position. Wonderful days. after university, I got a phone call from Rupert. He'd found an oil field in Colombia and he'd got promoted. And he'd also got a raise, a significant raise. And he literally phoned me up and he said, look, that boat that we always thought we would design, the one on the back of the beer mats, all those evenings we spent in Leamington after having been racing, I can afford it now. If you can build it for this, you can design it. And being young and bold, I thought, well, how hard can it be? So he flew into Heathrow for a business meeting. We literally met at the airport. I'd found a contract from somewhere, and we signed a contract there and then. A lady behind the desk, a BA lady behind her desk, she countersigned it, and off I went down to Cornwall to try and find a shed, a barn building, or a boatyard where it was big enough to build this 35-foot long, 33-foot wide boat. Never having done anything practical like this in my life, but again, how hard could it be? So I'd met some friends when I was at uni in London, and they were at the Yacht Design College in Southampton. And this fella here, who's standing in the middle, you can't hardly see him, but long-haired guy in skinny jeans, he was to become my business partner. His name's Allen Clarke. So I got teamed together with a good mate of mine, Peter Millward-Ski from uni, and Alan and a couple of his friends from the Yacht Design College, and we started building this trimaran from scratch. We started off with the Goujon book of boat building. Peter and I threw that away after 2 weeks because we didn't think it was accurate enough, and we just got on and built this boat. And she was a beauty. She was the first as wide as long trimaran. And gull wings, main sheet track on the back beam, all very innovative stuff at its time. And this is Rupert during the Round Britain race in 1989. He won his class in the 89 race. The boat, to my complete astonishment, still exists. It's still in one piece, which, considering what we did back in those days and how we built things, is pretty amazing, really. This was another order of beast. This was Spirit of Apricot, Tony Bullamore's second big 60-foot try. And after having built Fiery, this was the boat I ended up being a parapeteur for prior to the 1989 Round Yacht race. And I'd been working Bristol. Tony knew me. He needed a hand. I helped with the winter refit, and I was basically the boat captain. She was quite the beast, and the very, very first of the very wide 60-footers, with so wide that she needed 3 rudders, and she was incredibly quick. So quick that before the yacht race, we flipped her over and broke a wing mast, broke an outrigger, and we had to completely rebuild the boat again, to the extent that we didn't make the start of the 89 Euro race. But we got in up leg 3 and dominated the race from that point on. The last leg from Villamoura to Toulon, we arrived in Toulon, had dinner, went to sleep, got up the next morning having breakfast in the port, and the second boat had still not arrived. And when it eventually arrived, it was Jet Services 5, which was a catamaran, which was 15 feet longer than us and currently held the transatlantic record. So you can tell that Martin Smith and Barry Noble did an amazing job of designing and building this boat. She really was groundbreaking thing in its day, and I was very privileged to have got to have sailed her. But we still knocked around on small boats doing weird stuff as we did in those days. They were great days for sailing multi-hulls in the UK. This is a thing called the Three Peaks race, where you sail and climb the 3 highest peaks in Wales, England, and Scotland. Nutty kind of stuff. Great fun racing. And then in '93, I designed my first monohull with my partner. By that time, Allen Clarke and I had got together as designers, and this was the first Owen Clarke monohull, which was Maverick, and there we are fitting her carbon fiber keel, which was a big thing back in the day. Maverick was 30 feet long, nearly 14 feet wide. She only weighed 3,000 pounds. Carbon lifting keel, twin rudders, water ballast. Really a very, very radical boat in a day. A fellow called Mark Turner, who some of you will know, chartered her for the 93 Round Britain race. Unfortunately, broke the mainsail in the first leg and spent the rest of the race on catch up. But she was a lovely boat to sail, and I like the colour scheme. Ash hates it, but I always liked it. But we were still doing multis. This is a 40-foot try, which was Mike Golding's boat. He had a 30-footer called Gazelle, and then he moved up to 40-foot. This was the last multi he had. And again, like I said, 80s and 90s were wonderful times for racing multi-hulls. This is a boat called Triton. It was owned by a fellow called Alan Thomas. I mentioned Alan because Alan and Mike were good friends. Alan had a percentage share in Mike's try, and I got to sail with Alan in over 93, 94. That's us rounding Cape Horn, my first Cape Horn rounding with Mr. Thomas, who was an exceptional individual. In the 93 Vende Globe, this is Cardiff Discovery. Some of you American sailors will know her better as Thursday's Child. Alan bought Thursday's Child, entered the Vende Globe. He was between Kerguelen and Tasmania when the boat was rolled. He was thrown into the bilge and he broke ribs. He broke all his ribs on the front side, or many of his ribs on the boat front side, and a bunch of ribs on the back side. Had got basically a flailed chest. Spent 24 hours in the bilge, as he told me, just sucking through his teeth small amounts of air because he could hardly breathe. Eventually made it onto his bunk. Doesn't know quite how long he stayed on the bunk, but several days, and then eventually got to his med kit and was able to drug himself and then get a message out to race organisers. Meanwhile, the boat kept sailing under autopilot with a busted mainsail, but the boat was still sailing, and he sailed it all the way to Hobart. 6 months later, he and I picked the boat up, and we sailed it from Hobart to Salvador in Brazil. And here's Mike Golding again. So at the same time, Mike Golding, he'd come second in a round the world race with 14 crew on this same boat, a boat called Group 4, which was a 67-foot steel boat, we call it a challenge boat, Challenge 67. And this is Mike going around the world the wrong way, single-handed, after the single-handed record. Now, it's just so happened, this is Mr. Golding off Cape Horn, around about Christmas Day, end of 1993. As he's going in that direction, we're coming in the opposite direction from Tasmania. And the three friends, we meet up in the middle of the Southern Ocean, just west of Cape Horn. An absolutely incredible coincidence. I can't even remember how we knew that each of us were going around at the same time, or how in those days we managed to communicate with each other, because it wasn't easy back then. The same day we rounded Cape Horn. That's Cape Horn over my left shoulder. I'm just drinking the last of Alan and my whiskey in the water, saying thank you to the gods for letting us through there. And at this point, I remember using Satcom-C. Has anybody used Satcom-C? I sent a very small, short text message to my mother and father saying, hey, how are you? Where are you? I'm at Cape Horn. I've just arrived. I'd never told them that I was leaving. I just told them I was going sailing. Never told them where I was going sailing. And because I knew my mother would worry. So that was their first introduction to the fact that their son had just rounded Cape Horn. And my second text was, again, another short one was sent to a fella called Sir J. Blythe, who ran the BT Global Challenge race. He was the boss. He was the first man to sail single-handed around the world the wrong way. And basically, I asked him for a job as a skipper on the next race, which would be in 1996. and I got accepted. So we didn't have a lot of urgent design work going on. Alan gave me a sabbatical. In 95, I spent a year getting the boat ready. In 96, early 96, I met my crew in January 96. We sailed every weekend on a Sigma 38 and trained in the Solent during the winter of 96. And then in September, we started our race around the world. Crew of 1 professional skipper and 13 amateur crew, 11 of whom would sail all the way around the world with me, and 2 crew that would come in each leg. Ordinary people doing an absolutely extraordinary thing. This was start day. I woke up on start day and the rain was hammering against the windows in Southampton. The wind was blowing, and this was, I thought, oh, what have I let myself in for? This was just outside the Needles. If you look in the top part of the photograph there, that's global teamwork behind the wave. Day 1. And this is an iconic photo from day 1. This is Save the Children. That boat's on the way down, and you can tell the boat's on the way down because if you look at the guy on the foredeck, they're up in the air. That was what it was like in the Southern Ocean. But this is just the West Solent on the first day of a 30,000-mile race. And here we are. It's not a great photograph, but we're just coming down off Cape Horn. And you can see we're still heading south. We're at 57, and all the fleet's heading south. Just before we rounded Cape Horn, we went through a place called the Straits of Le Maire. It was bouncy, and the fellow on the right, Gordon Cunningham, was one of our our leggers. He was just doing the first leg. Fortunately, he was a tough lad, rugby player, teacher. He broke his nose just before we got to the Horn. And the guy on the left is Peter Craig. He's my first mate. He'd be about 45 when he was doing the race, something like that. So this is Cape Horn. Pete's just giving Gordon a hand to zip up his dry suit. This is the next photo of Peter 3 weeks later. He's absolutely shot. And the fellow up top left there, that's Kit Harrison. He was my youngest crew. Look at his eyes. They're not the eyes of a 21-year-old. That's a typical day in the Southern Ocean under Storm Staysail Reef. I'm just going to read you something now. Not something that I wrote, but something that one of my crew members wrote. Because it's going to give you a feel for what extraordinary things ordinary people can do, how far you can push yourself without realizing. So this is about leg 4, which was from Sydney to Cape Town. We thought leg 2 was tough. Leg 4 was hell on earth, complete purgatory. It was a combination of excessive wind and waves and so much damage that you feared for your life. Imagine what it's like, a black night where you cannot distinguish between sky and sea. There are icebergs all around. You've seen them that afternoon. You're heading further south and you have no compass. We'd lost the compass off the deck, the binnacle, and a bunch of other stuff from wave action. First thing you see as an approaching wave is the foam on the crest. The split second before it breaks over you, you crouch head down over a winch and hang on with both hands as the water hits you. It's not a splash, but a heavy, continuous 6 to 7 second waterfall that flattens you and fills the cockpit to waist level where you crouch. You stand this for about 45 minutes, no feeling in your hands. Even 4 layers of plastic bags can't keep your feet remotely dry. Below, it is cold and you dare not take the 3 layers you have on off. You lie in your bunk, cold and shivering. It's actually more frightening lying below, with only the shouts and the footfalls of the watch on deck to listen to. You feel totally at the mercy of the furious elements. Ironically, up to a third of the injuries we get on board were sustained from below. The galley is a particularly dangerous place. We changed sails every time the wind went up or down. It's worse changing sails when it drops because systems come through as fast and you're back changing again in minutes. The record was 27 changes in 15 hours. That's all the way up through the sails and all the way back down again, and then reefs to finish off with. Peter Gray, our watch leader, went overboard at one point because I think he was just too tired to let go of the sail he was hanging on to quickly enough when a fierce gust lifted it off the cabin roof where we were pulling it to. And he's especially safety conscious. He's always clipped on and careful to see we all stick to procedures. He went over the rail like a rag doll, and it took three of us all our strength to get hold of him by the head, hood and arms and haul him back on board. Fortunately, he'd done a lot of canoeing and he was used to finding himself upside down in the water for quite long periods. Music was important to us as a morale booster. At one moment, there were two of us dancing hysterically on deck in a storm to a punk record. You need something to break the tension. Nothing would ever possess me to go back down there again. After the BT, Mike and I rolled straight into an Open 60 campaign. Before we left on the BT, we'd already organised with his sponsor, if he did well and he won the race, that we would have a boat designed and built in France. And we'd interviewed designers and boatyards before we left on the race. And by the time we got back, we already had the money in place and we went straight into a design and build project. I project managed the design and build of this Pheno. It's a Pheno Conch design. And we built it. Pheno Conch had designed the winning Vende Globe boat for the previous two editions of that race. And we went to Vende and Cherbourg, who had built the previous winner of the Vende Globe. So I spent a great 8 months in France, living there, project managing the build. I learned an awful lot of what was the best in French design. And I also learned where I thought perhaps some Anglo-Saxon approach and a little bit of money and some technical know-how and testing might make a difference. But I knew I couldn't do it on my own. So when the chance came to design an Open 60, I talked to some friends of mine who I'd worked with before. The fellow on the far right of the screen is Rob Humphreys Yacht Design. He was probably the most prolific racing boat designer. No short-handed boat experience, but he'd done any number of whitbread boats, including Rothmans. And in the middle is Joe Belgrano, who very famous composite engineer, America's Cup designer. And far left, we were introduced to Alain Gauthier, who previous winner of the BOC Challenge and the Vende Globe, and together as a design team, we came up with this boat, Kingfisher, for Ellen MacArthur, the wee girl in the middle from Derbyshire. And here we are in the wind tunnel. And part of the idea of the boat was that what we didn't have in experience, so far as the French have been working on Open 60s for 10, 12 more years, what we could do is spend some money on technical research and add some Anglo-Saxon ethic to the project and come up with something better than was out there at the moment. And the result was Kingfisher. We went to New Zealand to build her, partly because the work that comes out of New Zealand is fantastic, but also because it gave us an opportunity to launch the boat on the edge of the Southern Ocean and for Ellen to sail the boat back to Europe. She'd never sailed in the Southern Ocean before, had really no Open 60 experience, and so that was an important part of the mix. I spent a lot of my time on the shop floor, working on the shop floor with the lads, and then project managing the boat in the evenings. And some of you will recognise, well, you might recognise Ellen on the horse at the back, but some of you will recognise the person right at the front. It's my current wife, Ash. This is when we first met, I think. Well, not quite when we first met, but She came out to New Zealand at Christmas, and Ash and Ellen were best of mates. So this is when my first recollection, anyway, of meeting Ash, I think. And here she is, my beautiful Kiffy. Quite the boat in his day. Very, very, very different from that current crop of French 60s. 3 headstays, central ballast, big long dagger boards, all things that the class took on in years after. But she was, as well as being technically very, very advanced, she was a beautiful girl. And Ellen sailed her all the way back to the UK from New Zealand to Cape Horn with crew, and then single-handed from Cape Horn to Europe. We did a little mini refit in Plymouth, and then she raced the Transat from Plymouth to Newport, Rhode Island, and she won in a field of 30 or so open 60s, including the likes of Mish Dej, Mike Golding. She won her first transatlantic race. And then the Vendée Globe, well, it's a matter of history. But she very nearly won that too, came in second. And that is the Vendée Globe. It starts in France, all down the West African coast, down through the Southern Ocean, the Indian Ocean first, then under Australia, then the Pacific, and then up South America and back to the sub. No stopping. Not allowed to stop. If you stop, you're out of the race. So it's as much about having a reliable boat as it is a fast boat. And this is Art Forms, the most my favourite boat. This was the design we did right after Kingfisher. She's basically a mini Kingfisher, 50 foot, but at 50 foot, everything's possible. If something goes wrong, you can handle it. Sail goes in the water, you can get to it. You can jibe the boat easily on your own. You can stack the boat easily on your own. This is by far the most favourite boat I've ever raced on. And I was very lucky to work with this wonderful guy, Kip Stone, American entrepreneur from the East Coast. And we did some great racing on the boat, Bermuda 1-2. Transat Yacht Varb, and Kit owned the boat for about 4 years, and then she came to the Bay Area. She was, you'll know her as Pegasus. Philip Kahn had her, and then Alex Meran raced her as Truth. Still my favourite boat. But during all this time, I still sailed with Mike. I thought I'd put this photo in because it's a classic. This was a round the island race on the Isle of Wight, and back in the day, they used to start the fast boats after the slow boats, and this is us catching up with the Sigma fleet on the back of the island. And I remember this really well because I was on the kite sheet on the port side, and Ed Danby was on the starboard side of the cockpit, and we were directing Mike through the boats, and I'd be saying to Mike, go starboard, and Ed would be going, go port, go port. And it was an absolute wonder that we didn't take somebody out with our outriggers. It was a fantastic race. Beautiful photo. I think that's a Rick Tomlinson photo. We've done 8 60s in all. This was number 2, number 3. I can't remember now. And many of our boats have been tank tested and wind tunnel tested, and the majority of them have been team efforts. It's not all about, definitely not all about Merv Owen. It's not even just about Owen Clarke. We do many of our boats as a design team, and at any one time during a design of a boat, there'll be 10 or 12 of us. I generally take the role as lead designer, but there'll be 10 or 12 people in the design team: engineers, composite engineers, rig designers, CFD, fluid dynamicists. I'm very much sure the jack of all trades and master of only a few. And so that was a tank testing model of Ekiva 3. We built 2 boats to the Ekiva 3 design, Ekiva and Aviva, and we were really lucky to be able to test the 2 boats. They were built in the same yard, sequentially after each other. They had the same sailmaker, the same rig designer, and the boats came out of the yard within 30 kilos of each other. So we were able to trial test for a couple of weeks, and we learned an awful lot about how to make these boats go quick. and or quicker, I should say. I thought I'd put this photo in. I know people have talked to the Yacht Club before about the Vendée Globe, but unless you've seen it live, it's really hard to explain. Michelle and Ross, you're here on this video conference. You can attest to it. It's just the most amazing sight. This is a 2016 race. I looked up some figures for it. These are real figures. So 5 days before the event, 650,000 people had been to the dock. The dock's set up so that you go down one way and come back up the other way, and it's continuous from the moment they open the dock in the morning to in the evening. The crews, to get to the docks, they go by boat because they can't get to the dock. 1.5 million people go through the race village by the time they start the race. On race day, we went down with Michelle, Ross, and we had Ash and I had a engagement party in Les Sables, one of our many engagement parties, and we were down on the mole on the other side at 6 o'clock in the morning, and we were not at the front of the queue. There's 350,000 people out there. It's November. It's freezing cold, and the boats don't start going out until 10 o'clock in the morning. And at 6 o'clock, you are not on the front grid to watch this go out. It's one of those bucket moments. You need to do it if you're into offshore sailing. To see this, see the passion that the French have for the sport is wonderful. This was our last 60-footer, Athiona, boat number 8, and she's a complete eco-powered. That's worth saying. So she's powered on solar panels and a hydro generator. No diesel engine in the boat at all. This is a s'mores boat we design or designed in the past. Mo will recognise her anyway. She's a Mini Transat boat. This is a young Irish fella, Cian McCarthy, and I doing the Trans-Gascoigne, Trans-Biscay race. 21 feet, transoceanic, transatlantic boat. Just so much fun, so much fun. I'll basically sail anything as long as I can make a cup of tea on it. This is an old 12 metre. It's a big maxi catch. But it's not all about racing. So after this design phase where I think we did 4 open 60s in 4 years or something like that, I was pretty tired, and two mates of mine from the BT, we bought an old race boat. Funnily enough, a race boat that I'd helped to prepare for around the world race in '93, called Skycatcher, and with 2 of my crew members from BT Global Challenge. The guy on the left is Anthony Lane, who's a mate on first leg, and Glyn O'Hughes, top left, and a couple of the guys. We sailed to Greenland to do a mountain climbing expedition. Glyn was a secretary of the Alpine Club, a good friend of Chris Bonington, and he brought along a good friend of his, and by happenstance, the fella in the middle is Malcolm Hay, and Malcolm is an Australian. He's still around. He was in his 70s then, and he's an Australian doctor. He'd been on the Antarctic bases with the Australian Antarctic guys, and but for me, what was amazing for me was that he'd sailed with the great Bill Tillman. Anybody who's read any Bill Tillman books would recognise Malcolm Hayes' name, because he was on Mischief when they went to Kerguelen. So it was a great honour to sail with Malcolm, because Bill had been one of my heroes, my sailing and climbing heroes, since I was a young boy, and this whole idea of sailing and climbing Greenland was inspired by Bill Tillman, the great Bill Tillman. So there's Skycatcher. That's in the middle of the Denmark Strait, which isn't near Denmark at all. It's actually between Iceland and Greenland, and that's an iceberg, not land. That's an iceberg. Now that's land. This is the edge of the sea ice, and it's about 30 miles to the mountains, something like that. We worked our way through the sea ice as far as we could. And then this is Glynno and I climbing in Iceland. While I was in Iceland, I'm not always working. That's true, actually. I'm not really always working. But I was doing some work in the library in Keflavik. I needed to catch up with my email, and an email came in from a German fella, saying, "Look, I saw Kingfisher. I love Kingfisher. I want to cruise around the world. I've had a Swan. I cruised around the world with that, but I want something better, faster. And I think I want to convert an Open 60." Well, I really didn't think that was on the cards, but I organised to meet the guy at the Southampton Boat Show because Kingfisher was going to be the star attraction, and he'd come over and he'd come and have a look at the boat. And I said, "Don't make your own mind up whether you can convert one of these boats to a cruising boat." He came over, what a gentleman, lovely man, Peter Trost, and he got it straight away. There was no way you can convert an Open 60 to a cruising boat. So instead, right there and then, he shook our hands right at the boat show and said, "I want you to design me the best cruising boat for me to take my family around the world." And within weeks, we had money in the bank account. And 3 years later, he had this Spirit of Adventure. And again, we built it at Martin Yachts in New Zealand. Peter met Steve Martin at the Dusseldorf Boat Show, less than 6 months after he first met me in Southampton, and he shook hands with Steve there and then, told him that he would build the boat, and then he did a deal with Steve, which I've never heard anybody ever do with a boat builder. He paid Steve 90% up front for the boat, handed over 90% of the money right up front for a bit of a reduced price, and because the Kiwi dollar at the time was so low. And Peter Trost. And this is me sailing on Spirit of Adventure in the office on her last sail with Pete from Durban to Cape Town, where we laid the boat up. And unfortunately, Peter got very ill, and he never sailed the boat again. It's time from time to time I take a break from sailing, and this was me Land Rovering from UK to Cape Town with my then girlfriend Julia, who, funny enough, had been one of my crew on the BT Global Challenge. Well, and I always hasten to add, no hanky panky while we were on the boat. We didn't meet up until years afterwards. And this is us crossing the Nubian desert, 3 days across the desert. And I put this photo in because setting up a Land Rover to drive big distances is very much like setting up for a boat, and planning a project is like planning for a boat project. And navigating, you use DR and EP, you use timed runs, you use a compass. There were not any real maps in this case. We were using a compass and using old Soviet era aviation maps actually to get ourselves across the Nubian desert. The whole thing, Land Rovering, it's so familiar. It feels so familiar when you're doing it. And of course, you're your own mechanic and all of that side of things. Class 40 has been a big part of my life for the last 15 years or so. This is one of our, not our earliest boats, but one of our early boats. I love these boats. This picture says it all. Easy miles. They're just two people on deck. Generally, we're only one person on deck. Tight up and just easy miles, under pilot, trimming away. Just great fun. This is our latest boat, which we launched last year, number 157. She was the 157th class 40 built since 2004. It's an incredible class. But this is the boat I know best, which is Dragon. Ash and I got engaged on Dragon on a delivery. She and I were on a delivery, taking her down to Miami for the start of the Miami Havana race, and I proposed on Cape Canaveral. That's another story. Dragon is owned by a fellow on the left, Mike Hennessy, who is one of the world's gentlemen. and stroker extraordinaire. A wonderful guy, so passionate about his sailing, so passionate about Class 40. Class 40 would not exist in the United States if it were not for my kind of tendency. And he's just a great guy to go sailing with. And I'm going to just scroll through a few photos now, because they're beautiful photos taken on board by onboard photographer during the 2016 Atlantic Cup, and there's some exquisite photographs here. So I'm going to shut up for a minute and just scroll you through a few photos. And here we are to 2015, and my first big race with Ash on her boat, Santana. This was the night 2015 Fastnet. We were racing double-handed, a fleet of 340 boats. We'd done some modifications to her. I designed a bowsprit, and we put some new sails, courtesy of a mate of mine in New Zealand, and a few other jobs on the boat. Super slippery Mark Schumacher design Capo 30. So slippery, in fact, that on the second night of the race, we were second in fleet out of the 340 boats off the Scillies. And then a stupid error on my behalf and put us down the fleet, but it wasn't a bad position to be in amongst a very experienced fleet indeed. With some great Grand Prix boats and some great navigators. It was a fantastic race to do. And after that, we brought her over to the States, and we did a load of East Coast sailing, racing. Pretty much won everything we did, double-handed. And then, and here we go. This is the only boat that I can't make a cup of tea on that I enjoy sailing. It's Ash's Flashman here in the bay in SF. So we stopped sailing Flashman, stopped sailing Santana, racing Santana on the East Coast. Last race we did was was from Halifax to I've forgotten the name of the islands now, French islands off the Newfoundland coast, and we decided that we'd take her to Greenland. So we took her out of the water in Newfoundland. She spent the winter there all alone, and then last June, we went and picked her up, sailed to the top of Newfoundland, came back to the States, then flew back out again, and did this awesome trip to Greenland, which is a whole nother talk just on its own. Glaciers coming down to the sea, Arctic fox in its summer's coat, eating an urchin of all things. And we're running down towards the end of the talk now, and I've got to introduce you to Mr. Allen Clarke on the right. Owen Clarke Design is Owen and Clarke. Clarke's been my business partner for 29 years. We've never had a falling out. We've never discussed money. He's been my best friend for 35 years. And it wouldn't have happened without Clarke. I'm the engineer, I'm the sailor, I'm the numbers guy, and the guy who's got the most miles. It's true. Clarke's done a couple of transatlantics himself. He's raced his oars and back, so he's no mean sailor himself. But I can't do this. He's the artist in the team. I'm the engineer. we wouldn't be able to design the boats that we do without Mr. Clarke. This is Killer. She was launched 18 months ago. She's a high latitude boat, high latitude cruising boat. Land Rover on the outside, very much a Land Rover, our first aluminium boat, and Range Rover on the inside. Really fantastic boat. Our inside's amazing. Again, it's a talk all on her own. This boat, the whole development of her and the boat itself is just take hours to go through it. And this is our latest project, our 2020 project, which is a motor sailor for a climate research group who got us to design it for Arctic research. So that's the lot. Any questions?
So I want to remind everybody, you can type your questions into the Q&A there, or raise your hand, and we can get onto that. There you are. You know, Murph, I'll start with a quick question. So you seem to have a great sense of humor, and you're incredibly patient. Have those characteristics been one of those characteristics been the keys to your success?
Patience, certainly. Patience. My sense of humor gets me in trouble sometimes, though. I have a very British sense of humor, and so that sometimes gets me in trouble. But yes, yeah, patience definitely, for sure. Both on the water. I love light air sailing. I really like it when it's hard, when it's rough. And I do enjoy that when it's rough and cold and wet and dark and nasty, because it can never be as rough and dark as nasty as I've already been through. So I know that day will end, as it were, but I really do enjoy light air sailing. I find it very challenging, and I'm sure patience is a big part of what makes me reasonably good at that.
Mm-hmm. So here's another question for you. It's from Miles. I believe it's your brother-in-law. He wants to know who your favorite designer is other than yourself, and what is your favorite design of that designer?
Oh,
and
wow.
Which of Ashley's brothers do you like the best?
Favorite designer. Oh, right off the top of my head, race boat designer. Oh, honestly, it's hard to say. When I first started, I guess when I first started designing, it was multi-hulls, and if I looked up to anybody, it was Nigel Lyons.
Yeah. How would you compare him to like Dick Newick?
Dick, well, Fiery Cross was moored right next door to one of Dick's boats, Holston Beer, in the '88 Transat, and I got to know Dick really well, and I loved talking with Dick. And yeah, Dick was a different era from Nige. Dick would be the same era as Derek Kelsall and the like. So yeah, I always enjoyed talking with Dick. And the last time I spoke to him actually was at the end of the end of the BOC in '98, I think it was, in Maine. I went to try and find him. Yeah, Dick Newick, great guy, and Moxie. Yeah, of course, Moxie and Three Legs of Man. Which those two boats, when they were racing that race, was an amazing race. The two old men basically beat everybody.
So we've got a question here. Where did it go? Oh, it's an anonymous person. What's your advice for junior San Francisco Yacht Club members who are interested in becoming naval architects?
Okay, so my advice is to be multi-skilled. The thing you have to be in the right place at the right time. There are any number of Merfyn Owens out there who weren't lucky enough to get the breaks that I got because they didn't meet the right people at the right time. That's just the truth of it. But if you're going to try and stack the deck in your favor, that you can't just go to yacht design school and expect to expect to become a yacht designer. What you need to have is other arrows in your quiver. You need to be a really good sailor and stroke oar. You need to spend some years in the boatyard, be a good boat builder. You need to be an incredibly good computer programmer, preferably lots of them. The deal about it is most of the design firms that you're ever likely to get a job with are pretty small. At one time, we were 8 people, and we were one of the largest design firms at that point. They're normally quite small firms. So when you join a firm, you have to be able to bring in the dollars pretty quickly in 3, 4, 5, 6 months. And if all you can offer is having done a yacht design degree, that's not going to be enough. You're going to have to know how to work with people. And one of the good ways of doing that is to go and work in a boatyard. And the skills that you learn in a boatyard will help you to design things that boat builders want to build, and that can be built, because that's often another whinge that I hear from boatyards is they can't build what yacht designers are designing. So go out there, get yourself some more skills. I've been doing this an awful long time, but I wasn't earning my money just from yacht design until after I designed Ekova 3. So that's not 2008. That's only like 12 years ago. I was still project managing. I was still doing other stuff. So the key is, don't think you can just go to yacht design school and then go and get a good job.
Yeah. I would add too, here in America, if you're lucky enough, there's a great school called Webb Institute. And it's probably one of the premier yacht designing or ship designing schools, and it's a free ride.
Yeah, the Webb the Webb is, I would say, is the equivalent of UCL. It's a naval art college, and you'll learn some fantastic stuff there. It's a very technical degree.
Yeah. So here's another question. It's from Tina Lund. What's your most significant accomplishment? Wink, wink. I think she means Ashley. Apart from Ashley.
In sailing terms, I'm going to give you 2, and that one is being skipper of BC Global Challenge on global teamwork, and coming back with all the crew that I left with, which is rare. But I'd also say those days I spent up in the ice in Greenland, the time I spent navigating in the ice up there, because there was nobody to teach me, nobody else on the boat had any experience of doing it. All I had was what I'd read, which was mainly Tillman, and he lost 3 boats in the ice. I was making it up as I went along, and it was the most stressful, but at the same time, the most fulfilling sailing I'd ever done. And I put the fulfillment level and the joy and the stress, maybe not the right word, but the challenge was as much in those days that I spent up there as it was at any time in the Southern Ocean. In the Southern Ocean, things got completely out of hand and I was going to die, and there was nothing I could do about it. But if you can imagine that, I would equate those days up in East Greenland, breaking new ground up there was fantastic.
Oh, sweet. Larry Stoller just says, wow, thank you for your presentation. We have a question from Bob McDermott. He says, what do you think of the latest America's Cup boats? And what would be your choice of design for another America's Cup?
That's a great question. And I'm going to give an answer that will disappoint people, I think. I'll go back to very quickly, I'll go back to Kingfisher and the multi-hulls. When I first started yacht design, I was doing multi-hulls, and we designed from first principles. Make the boat as light as you can, make it stable, put some sails on it, reduce drag, make it go fast. Forget the rules. There was no lead on them. And then the next stage on, I was doing open 60s, and there was basically no rules again. Make it as efficient as you can, make it as light as you can, still make it reliable, just make it go fast. Don't worry about the rule. So I never got America's Cup. I didn't understand this 12-meter thing. And then now boats. What's the point of yachting around with 30-some bulldogs on the boat? The boats go upwind almost the same speed as they go downwind. Where's the fun in that? I didn't get it until I got to New Zealand in 2000. We built Kingfisher at the same time the book was going on. And I was lucky enough, because we were doing a high-profile project, I went out on the North Sails boat, which was basically the judge boat, that went right in amongst the racing. And then I completely got it. The whole match racing, what people saw in it, I understood. It clicked. I don't understand the current America's Cup. I don't think it has anything to do with sailing. I don't find it particularly interesting. I thought it was amazing when the Kiwis nearly went over in San Francisco Bay, and obviously that little bit of it where Oracle were catching up and overrunning the Kiwis was amazing sport. But it's not sailing. And so I'd like to see the Cup go back to monohulls, ordinary monohulls, where the racing skills of the boys are what it's all about. And in terms of design, the things that are developed in that design space can then be used in the rest of sailing, and that ordinary sailors can understand what the hell is going on, and it's applicable to them. To me, the Cup, I don't even watch it because it's just, I don't mean to belittle it, because I know it's got fans and technically it's really interesting, but it's really of no interest to me.
Okay. Laurie Fromm wants to know, what haven't you done that's on your list?
I've not been to India. I'd love to go to India. And I'd like to drive my Land Rover from Europe through the back of the Himalayas to Kamchatka. And in sailing terms, I just want to keep on sailing as long as I possibly can, competitively, for fun, cruising with Ash, racing with Ash. The double-handed is what I really, really do enjoy, but I just want to keep on sailing as long as I can, doing as many things as I can on boats where I can make a cup of tea.
So this next question is sort of similar to the other one, but there's a part of it that's different. So, so what do you think about foiling boats, and do the kind of foils we are seeing in the AC-75s have any relevance to long distance offshore racing?
The challenge isn't the foiling, and the challenge has never really been the ability to get up on the foil. The US Navy was doing it years ago with Willie Waugh, and back in the day when I was doing my first multi-hulls, I showed you a photograph of Triton. That was a foiling 40 by the fantastic designer Adrian Thompson. The problem is not the foiling. The problem is control. Is height control. So the America's Cup boats they're controlled by computers. There's an amazing amount of software development that goes into running these boats. It's not about lifting on the foil. It's about controlling. And offshore, as a person, you would not be able to be in control of the foil. Computer software has to be on control of the foil. So will it come? Quite possibly it will. But we shouldn't necessarily confuse it with sailing.
Okay, we have two more, or actually one more, or two more. Leslie Richter wants to know, what's the project you would like to have in the future?
It was easy. 5 years ago, I was just said a Volvo. The Volvo was very much what I felt was the pinnacle of what I wanted to do. I've always wanted to do a Volvo boat. We've got very close a few times. I'm sure we could have done well on a number of the races, especially when the type of boat rolled changed. When the rule became new, it allows for people to come in and innovate, and it's a more level playing field. That's where we were lucky with not lucky, but we saw the gap with the Open 60. we saw the gap with the Class 40. When the new rule is opened up, there's the ability to come in, and everybody, even new designers to that new space, are on pretty much a level playing field with other people, and in some ways have an advantage because you come in with a fresh perspective, and you come in from other classes, and you bring in new ideas, and you can innovate, whereas perhaps some of the guys who are already working in that class are a little bit tunnel vision. And I have to be aware of that in what I do. I try not to be tunnel vision in my own speciality. What would I like to do? I'd like to do IRC crew boats. I call them IRC, conventional crewed race boats, because particularly offshore boats, and we've pitched some very high end Grand Prix boats in recent years, and we haven't in the end got the job for various reasons. But there's definitely areas of certainly offshore where what we've been doing in Class 40 and the Mach 60s, if you look where our hull shapes and our keels and everything are compared to where the rest of the world is in their offshore boats, we've developed at an incredible rate, and we've left everyone behind. There's stuff that we can bring in from Class 40 and Open 60, which is obvious, not just to myself, but to guys like Vende and whatever, that is not being done by the usual suspects in offshore race boats. To a certain extent, I don't recognise some of the boats as being offshore race boats at all.
Yeah, I've always thought of the Open 60 as being on the edge of everything. Bob McDermott says
they look on the edge, but
by the edge I mean like of the design, like they are the thing. They are what you can do so much with in terms of sailing, racing.
Yes, they are. They're an amazing beast. And the Class 40 is an amazing beast. They're incredibly easy boats to sail until they're not. Mm-hmm. Obviously, the new foiling 60s, that's not the same thing. But boats like Echo 3 and the pre-2000, the pre-foiling boats, they're amazing boats, but they're much easier to sail than you would imagine. Certainly when you're offshore as well, you've got more time to go through the process of sailing the boat. It's not like racing around the cans. And Class 40s are even easier, because when things the problem with over 60s is when things go wrong, when you haven't made that sail change in time and the breeze is up, now you're in trouble because the beast is getting away with you. But on a Class 40, if you leave it too late, it's not a big drama. You'll lose seconds per mile while you sort the mess out, but you'll get away with it. But Class 40s, these short-handed boats are so easy to sail, and that's what makes the technology that we use in those boats so applicable to cruising boats, because you don't sail a cruising boat with loads of crew. You generally very short-handed, and that's some of the things that we've done with Killack, for instance. The boats sailed by the skipper's over 70 years of age, and his daughter only learned how to sail 2 years ago, and they sail a 66-footer, and they're up in the top of Norway at the moment.
Very, very nice. Bob McDermott said, thank you for a great presentation, and he hopes to talk to you sometime soon. There's a question here from Dave Alexander. What's your take on this year's Vende Globe fleet? Any major innovations? And most importantly, have we got a house booked for the start? Dave and Isabel.
Dave, we haven't booked the house yet this year. It didn't do us any good last time either, because if you remember, we ended up having to rebook. Obviously it's a hell of a field on this coming Vende Globe. I think you've got to weigh up Alex Thompson for sure, Armel. It's the usual suspects. The big teams who've had more time to develop their third set of foils and who are likely to be more reliable. But in the end, it's the Vende Globe, and the Vende is a big leveler, and you have to finish in order to win. and historically we know that less than 50% of the boats finish. So it's really very much an open field this year. I wouldn't go to Ladbrokes and put any money on any of them.
Nice. Rich wants to know what is the most difficult part of boat? What is the most difficult part of the boat to design and engineer?
Oh, that's a good question. It used to be the keel. On a Mocha 60s anyway, it used to be the keel. That's no longer the case for various rule reasons. What's the most difficult part of design? I would say the thing that takes the most time on a race boat is truly takes the most time is to if you're doing a custom race boat is for you and the client to develop the boat that the client wants, because quite often the client actually doesn't 100%, even somebody like Mike Golding who's on their third Open 60, actually getting the boat that they actually want takes a bit of time, and so it's the whole communication thing between client and designer, and then build that into the yard. That takes the most time, and I wouldn't say it's the most difficult. It's probably one of the most interesting parts of it, but it is what takes up the most time. Technically, if you've got the right team, like we have on a 60 where there's 10 of us and working as a design team, and none of it's too difficult. None of it is too difficult. On the smaller boats, you might have your back up against it if the schedule's tight, and so probably what takes the most time is the engineering, the general engineering of the boat, the details, not what the hull laminate is, but how to connect one part to another and do it in a nice way that the yard aren't going to add weight because it's difficult to build. So keeping it simple and light, that's the most difficult thing. Doing all the interior engineering detail.
Cool. Okay, we have one more question. This is from Adam Spiegel. He's a J105 owner racer. Is there anything that you see as exciting in the inshore one designs?
In the inshore one designs, honestly, I have to tell you that I haven't taken a great deal of notice. To be honest, I've had a number of conversations over a time since I've been here with various people about the bay, and I have my own thoughts about it, about the type of boats that are raced on the bay and whether they're ideal for the conditions that are in the bay, and whether there could be something different. I believe that there can. I believe that there can be a different boat for the bay. But inshore one designs, it's.
Oops. Murph, I don't know if you can hear me, but you're frozen. Hello.
Might be us.
Okay, so I'm not sure you guys can all hear me, but we lost Murph. But anyway, I just want to say thank you all for coming and experiencing this. I hope you enjoyed it, and I think I've got something else in the works for another time. In the meantime, it looks like Murph is trying to get back on, and I believe he is, and I'll let him say goodbye too to you guys if he gets here. Anyway, let's see. Welcome to technology. Am I the whole screen? No. So I guess I am. All right, I'm getting all these things. Okay, so we're gonna put this on the whole video on YouTube and put it in the bow wave so that everybody who missed it can see it, okay? And again, thank you guys so much for participating, and yeah, we'll do this again. I've got something really fun, I hope, coming down the road. I don't know if you guys remember this man who wrote a book about rum. And I'm trying to get him to come back, and we'll do him on Zoom, maybe get our Phil to send out recipes for his famous Mai Tais. So everybody has everything you need, and we'll get a nice presentation on rum and make some drinks and have a really nice time. Okay, so I think we're done here. And so hopefully we'll see you soon, okay? Thank you all for coming. All right, bye.